Hey guys, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about something a little bit more airy. I just kind of want to talk about like friendship dynamics, specifically with women, and why I think our relational dynamics are so complicated. So, as it's pertaining to Black people and like Black women, I think in all the ways I don't want to say society, but like it kind of really is society. And when we have these conversations, when we pull from historical events that have impacted our lives today, like things that are literally a byproduct of why we are the way we are today, a lot of people will look at this like this is a taboo. And it's like I'm saying something that's just like so foreign. And I'm just letting you know right now, this is not a foreign land. This is the present time. And there really are certain things that have taken place that have kind of set us in this position to where we are today. So I think in all the ways Black women and Black men, right? We kind of have this divisiveness, and there's all this relational discourse in our relationships today. I think it's the same with friendships. So I think one of the biggest factors of like female friendships, I would say, is just the divisiveness that takes place from going to like cohort schools with guys. And I talked about this, but I wrote a column about this, but I really just feel like when it comes to like female relationships, the reason why a lot of women don't get along today is because of men. And like this isn't to be like, oh my God, men are the problem. Like, no, I'm not saying men are the problem. I'm just saying that this is a contributing factor to why our relationships are the way that they are. So obviously when men come into play, there's a sense of competitiveness, right? There's kind of like the backbiting of the betrayal and the cheating, and all of those things start to impact how we see each other as women, because we start to realize, oh, there really is not this saintly thing, which I think a lot of young girls are trying to conjure up and paint this imagery today. And it may not be something that they're even trying to conjure up. It may just be like genuine naivete. But it's kind of like there's this sainty image that I feel like a lot of women are wanting to represent today about womanhood and about women. And it's just not true. And it's not to say that women are, not saintly. It's not to say that women aren't great. You know what I mean? I'm a woman. We're great. We're fabulous. But I do think that we kind of have to like dial it back, because it's not true, right? And so I think when you start to live a little bit of life and you start to see like, okay, women can be just as barbaric, just as sinister, just as inconsiderate and conniving as men. And so I do think that in our relational dynamics with men, I think that that kind of plays a huge role as to why women kind of fail in relationships today, especially we know with like things being integrated online. Like I know for me, I ran into someone I used to know in the store, and this woman was like breathing down my throat. Now she wasn't a sister, you know what I mean, but I just was like so taken back because I'm just like, I'm not talking to you, you know what I mean. But it was almost like she was really fascinated, or at least kind of just like in my business, you know what I mean, as I was talking to my male friend. And it was almost like the sense of fascination, which I would contribute that to society today. We know the explosion of the rhetoric and everything that took place with like interracial dating and like, all of that. So I think that there were a lot of contributing factors as to why she was all up in my business as I was talking to him that just really didn't have anything to do with something surface level. So another thing, I would say that, unfortunately, there's something about I think women and maybe how we relate to one another, to where it's like I feel like we feel like we have to be like men and just like have these very superficial friendships. And I just don't think women are like that. Like I think that we are emotional. Most women are emotional. We're very sensible. We're very sensitive. We're intuitive. And it's just like everybody's not really going to get along. So I think that the modern movements, with Gen X, and I mean, not Gen X, Gen Z, and I'm Gen Z. Not really, but like, you know what I mean? Yeah, not really. No, I'm a little bit older than girls. I wouldn't say that I'm Gen Z, but I technically am Gen Z. Anyway, I think that there's kind of like this idea that all women are the same. And I think that that's kind of been the byproduct of having these movements that have like literally like are founded and rooted in hating men. So I think a lot of women kind of feel like, okay, let's go to the opposite side and create this kind of like sisterhood that's really false and is kind of built on just simply hating men. And so I think what you have is like people are like girls, girls, and it's like, but they're not really girls, girls though. You know what I mean? And I think what you kind of have, this is what I was alluding to, is like this elusive idea that all women are the same and that all women can get along. And it's just not true. And it's not for any, I don't think it always has to be for any backbiting reason. Like I genuinely just think that not everybody get along with everybody personality, and that's okay. I think for me, I've like thought about friendships, and you kind of see a lot of this content today online where it's like there are a lot of women creating content like 5 signs of a fake friend and 6 signs of a good friend and 3 green and it's just like you have all of this instead of just kind of going on your intuition. And I can honestly say now that I'm a little bit older, looking back hindsight, if you really are with people that you're questioning, whether that's male or female, it really doesn't matter. You're just in the wrong place. You know what I mean? Like, I don't always think that it requires self-reflective work. And again, me personally, I'm someone who does do introspective work, right? It's just like, it's what I do. You know what I mean? I love sitting, digesting, reading, reflecting, and thinking almost to the point of dwelling, unfortunately. But it's just like, I feel like at the end of the day, it's not always a you problem. Like, genuinely, some people just don't get along. And I think that that kind of creates not only an unrealistic expectation, but it definitely creates some type of like fantasy as it relates to female friendships because it's just like not everybody gets along. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that it's always a matter of, okay, what is wrong with me? Let me step back, let me reflect, let me think about this when it just genuinely gives everything is not for everybody. And that's okay. I think where this becomes dangerous or where this kind of becomes like this competitiveness and again, divisive is when you start saying better than, right? And we kind of seen this with like the plain Jane rhetoric, you know, the average woman rhetoric. And then we kind of see this with the certain aesthetics that are upheld within society, especially as it pertains to Black women. Don't get me wrong, we're fabulous. You know what I mean? And I think that Black women can exist in a lot of different multitudes. Like, absolutely. You know what I mean? But I do think that we do kind of have to shine a little bit of light on that, that kind of like tactic that really separates us and it kind of puts people in categories. And I think that it starts to negatively shine a light on women and like things that could be beautiful about our differences. It's kind of starts to be like it's kind of picked apart and then it's like this is good, this is bad. You know what I mean? Or this is the standard, this is what it is, and then this is not the standard. You know what I mean? And so I just think both groups, right? Whether you're a woman who likes makeup or you don't like makeup or whatever the case may be, whatever your thing is as a woman that, you know, the things that make you an individual, whenever it's not on this collective kind of like playing field and it's not a social trend, it's not something that is upheld within our society or especially within our community as Black women, then it kind of becomes like you kind of become the outlier. And then there's negative feedback on both sides. And so I think now what you have is because of the internet, we have these shallow minds. And so it's like everything is kind of based on aesthetic. And it's like if you look at a person's certain aesthetic, you kind of size this person up and everything just kind of becomes like profile pictures, right? Like we kind of just swipe and delete, take what we don't want, and then criticize everything that we maybe don't understand or we don't like about a person. I think that this is probably one of the biggest hindrance to sisterhood and like girls' relationships and women's relationships is because it's like you kind of start to do this thing where you start to feel like you don't necessarily have to exist in a vacuum, but it's like the things that make you unique as a woman are then like cast away and it kind of you have to exist in this vacuum of like womanhood, which is really like surface level stuff. I think a lot of the modern movement today, like the girls and things like that, again, these movements are started by children. I tell you guys this all the time. You know, as much as we are fascinated with the younger generations, you know, they do have technology, they have all of these beautiful advances, you know, they can go out in the world and they can get jobs on Indeed and etc. They're still children. They don't know everything about the world. And so it's like I think we put younger generations on a really big pedestal, especially as it relates to defining culture and shifting movements and really being like the voice of culture. And I think that this is kind of what we have. Like we have a younger generation who is the voice of the culture, who don't have the experience and who really don't know what they're talking about. You know, so it's like, yeah, not every woman exists in this realm. And I remember as a mentor, you know, working with younger girls and, you know, feeling like, okay, do you want to try this? Do you like that? And they're like, not every girl wants to wear makeup. Not every girl, you know what I mean? And it's true. You know, for me growing up, I wasn't that girl. And I also thank God that I had the ability to kind of grow. I really feel for a lot of young women today, like that's why I do the work of mentorship, you know, but I feel for a lot of young women today because it's like you don't even have the opportunity to grow and expand and figure out who you are as a young woman. Like you have so many pressures and influences, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just to the point where it's just so overwhelming to where it's like, it's really hard to kind of find your sense of self and your authenticity because you are kind of like forced to go and do certain things and look a certain type of way. And I think for anybody who tries to refute this and say, oh no, you can just be your own person in today's, excuse me, in today's society, that is bullcrap. I think for a child, you know, who has this very fragile sense of self, like you're figuring out who you are, that's a lot to expect from someone to push, you know, to go against the current and like push against the grain. Like that's really hard. I don't even think you have the It's not that you don't have the resiliency, but I just think that that's a lot to ask of a child, you know? So there's a lot of factors there, you know, but I think overall, I think if we can kind of get to this place where we can respect each other's differences and stop looking at other women and, kind of like antagonizing them and doing this either or better than type of attitude and just kind of letting people be who they are. Everybody's different. You know what I mean? Everything is not for everybody. And that's absolutely okay. You know what I mean? Like, I know for myself, like I said, looking back hindsight, I realized that you just don't get along with everybody, but it doesn't mean that there's beef. You know, I think for a lot of times with women, we do this thing where because we are intuitive, because we are emotional, if something's not clicking, if everything is not copacetic, we're like, okay, something's wrong. And then nothing's wrong. It's just like, this is just not the fit. And I think instead of looking at things kind of like in that way, we kind of start to, pick. And it's like, it has nothing to do with, you know, all these different, it's just like people are different and that's okay. And then you also have to think too, in the same ways that we look at compatibility in terms of our romantic relationships, certain people have different interests. You know what I mean? Certain people move a different type of way. People have different values. People have different upbringings, right? That unique sense of what makes a person themselves, how they were brought up. It's so many different layers in regards to that. And so I think when you kind of just try to fix the problem by putting this band-aid solution on female friendships, that kind of becomes a problem. So anyway, I'll end with this. I was just reading this Bible plan on, like, it's called redeeming or reclaiming the feminine soul or spirit or something like that. And it just kind of talks about like God being, in feminine and masculine energies and just kind of like working with that. And so, yeah, I do think it's childlike, but when you do that kind of like monolithic thing and you only put women in like a certain space, it just doesn't really give. Also think too, I'll throw this little piece in there. I do think that there's always going to be complexity, just a little bit, in terms of friendships sometimes, because it's like if there's not a collective understanding of the competitiveness that women may feel, especially in regards to like being territorial. So if you guys are in the same line of work, things like that, like you do kind of have to consider that as well. So I think that's always important to be whole and be happy with your own life and what it is that you have going on. I just think maybe it's from a humanistic standpoint, but when you're kind of getting it out the mud, you know what I mean? You're starting from scratch. You guys are all trying to be, in the same area. There may be some competitiveness that comes up, especially if you guys are not being nurtured outside of your friendship. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind. But back to my whole thing with the Bible verse, everybody's different. And you kind of got to embrace those differences, and as you get older and you start to figure out what does it mean to have a friend, because I think when you're young, you're not really looking for, you don't really have that, I won't say you don't have that understanding, but it's not so concrete. You know what I mean? You're kind of just looking for people to hang out with, people to have fun with. And again, of course, be mindful of that, because you can hang out with some wrong people who can alter your entire life, you know what I mean, by their poor decisions. We know that bad company corrupts good character. So, keep your head on a swivel. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's that deep. You know what I mean? But then you get older, you start to figure out who you are, and you start to want friends who are, who kind of have similar values. And what I found is that by operating from a place of authenticity, having your values, you find your people and it's natural, it's organic, you guys love each other, and there is none of this, right? All of this drama, this cattiness, this forced ideas of like femininity, it doesn't exist. You're with your girls, you let your hair down, you have a good time. So that's my take on friendships. And I think that, if you can apply this into your life, great. I hope it helped. Peace.